Okay, so now it's August 12th, 2019. It's obviously the next day. I fell asleep, people. I do that sometimes. Anyway, there's our applesauce. So, and I've got some of that apple still in the fridge that I was going to make apple butter, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to probably put it in there, cook it all up, and then get jars ready, right? That is the apple peels. I'm going to strain it, and then I'm going to see what the liquid tastes like, and I may make apple peel syrup. This is plums. Andre and I, we went to the tree where these plums came from, and I think it's the same tree where these plums came from. And if you remember, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I got a long day ahead of me, people. A very long day. All right. I think we're okay here. Favorite corner in life. Yeah, I got a long day. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. And before I go anywhere, assuming that I can get there, because I don't even know if I have enough money, to be honest with you, I have to finish this stuff first. Otherwise it's going to spoil, right? And I can't have it backing up too much, because that apple tree is still half full. And don't forget, I got the potatoes, and I still got squash to do, and you know, that type of thing. So in the meantime, I made this, remember? Right? The hot and sweet yellow plum sauce. And I actually really like it. I was going to cook this up into just smaller jars for Amari, but it just kind of got pushed off to the side. The only reason it's turning brown is because of oxidization, not because it's spoiled. But if you're concerned about it because it sat there for a couple days in the fridge, because that's what happens with canning. Everything starts to come in at one time. So you have to kind of have to balance. Obviously your energy is one of them, you know, and you have to balance how you're going to process this stuff in quantity and quality to where you get the most out of it in terms of cost, right? But sometimes, because there's so much, there's a pile of this and a pile of that and a pile of this. Like one year, you know, the plums were going out of control. The apples were going out of control. And I was doing more than one apple tree. And then, you know, the zucchini was growing and the squash was growing. Everything was growing. So, you know, at one point, the plums I didn't really get to, and I didn't have a fridge. I didn't have a second fridge. My son kicked me out of my fridge downstairs. He said, that's it. It's not your fridge no more. You can't use it. Right? So everything was piling up on the porches. And then, of course, the kids are running around complaining that I've got rotten fruit, right? That's piling up. Well, that's because, in part, you can't put it in a fridge. And if you can't put it into the fridge, it's going to spoil faster. So one year, last year, was it last year or the year before? I know it was last year, people, because just this year there's like no plums, or pears, I should say, just like just very sparsely, right? I should have been canning plums. I'm sorry. It's going to be a long day. I should have been canning pears before I was making maybe, let's say, zucchini relish. Because the pears would have been more beneficial for Amari versus the zucchini relish that you wouldn't use as much, right? So what I'm saying is, you know, when it all starts to come in, you have to, you know, you in your supermind, you think you're going to do everything, but some of it does end up in the compost heap. So anyway, Andre and I, we left a note on the door from where this tree is, because when we went to go get the walnuts in the back, we noticed the tree. At first I thought it was an apricot tree, but then it turned out it was a yellow plum. And then the lady, my neighbor, gave me a bag. So they must have picked, those neighbors must have picked the plums and then gave it to that neighbor, and then that neighbor gave it to me. But because Andre and I have been eyeballing that tree ever since we've seen it, every time we go to go get the apples, we knock on the door so that we can ask if we can have those plums if they don't want them. So this has been going on for a couple of weeks now, right? So then I'm trying to teach Andre, well, you know, you just can't go into people's yards and start raiding their tree. You know, just because they're not answering their door doesn't mean you have the right to do that. So why don't we put a note on the door? So we did that. We put a note on the door asking if we can have the plums if they don't want them. We left our phone number. And then the next day, you know, we hadn't heard anything yet, right? I think the note was up for like a day or two, right? And then, so anyway, yesterday, we were going to go get apples, because I go every day, right? And because you don't know if you're going to get a big bag or two, or a little bag or two big bags, right? So I like to get them as they're falling, and, you know, like, I still have this one here. I'll show you people. Like yesterday, we got all this. This is like a full bag. Do you see? Look how big that bag is. You go to the grocery store, organic apples, that's more than $10. Trust me. See? These ones are going to go in the fridge today, as well as those other ones. I just haven't been able to do that yet, because I do have a second fridge to some degree. And of course I started making applesauce yesterday, but then I ended up fell asleep. Okay, so as we're walking to get the apples, right? Finally somebody's in the driveway at this house. So long story short, they said they had gotten a note, but the tree had already been picked. But we were more than welcome to go in the back and find any more if there was to be found, right? Some. And so that's what we did. So now you see, I have nice, well, you can't really see. But anyway, I have new stuff here. New plums that I'm going to blend up. Start counting my cups. When in doubt, just taste it. It's fruit. Tastes good for cooking. Right? Grind that up. Combine the two together. I don't know. That's going to be more than 10 cups. But whatever it is, I'm making something similar to this. Because this will store really well for a long, long, long time. Okay, that's the battery running out. These cameras, they don't have a lot of space to save, and videos take up a lot of space. And now that I've got these 3 different cameras, 4 different, well, I use between 3, right now. I'm noticing, well, it's not that I'm noticing, but I'm having to notice more now that these cameras are set on different settings within the workings of the camera, so that when you take it to a computer and you import it into a computer, and then you want to go render it into a video that you can upload onto YouTube, because the settings of this, that's as it's recording, is different with each camera. They're recording differently, and they're rendering differently, and they're uploading it differently, and YouTube is saying, well, you're not rendering in the proper fucking format. And I'm like, oh, and I'm trying to figure it out, people. And so anyway, but these cameras, like, they don't have a lot of, they don't on these little flash drive disc things, like, you don't get that many videos on them. You really don't. And these batteries don't retain a lot of time. One is more fickle than the other. I think maybe I'm using the more fickle one. Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, So I taught Andre that you just can't go into people's yards and start raiding their tree just because you were in the back and you seen that there was fruit growing off of it, right? And through that process, we actually got some extra plums. This store is pretty handy, and it's just easy to make, and it's tasty, and you know, next year you might not get the plums, and if you do, that's when you can do something else because you already have this in storage, right? Or, you know, I'll have the mother load of pears like I did last year, and this year, people, I didn't want to do a lot of canning. I really didn't, because I'm tired. And it bulks up the kitchen. But at the end of the day, when you're in a situation like me, and you know it's there, and you know how to do things with it, and you know it builds in food security, blah 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 blah, you know it's kind of hard to turn your back away on it and watch it just spoil, right? You know what I mean? I didn't expect to get the plums this year, but I'm grateful that I did. And I don't want to waste them. I don't even want to waste this much, right? But, you know, so anyway, we got the pears. Now I got a double batch. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blend them up. I'm going to count my cups, and I'm going to start figuring out what I need to make another batch of this. And I'm going to try and can this today, even though I'm tired, people, because over the next few days, I don't know. I have to go to the hospital and go see Sierra. I have to, right? I don't know what it's going to be like, because at the rate that I'm going right now, you know, I want to sit down and write a complaint and file it with their complaint department so that it can be shuffled under the envelope, file folder or whatever, and forgotten about. I shouldn't have to write a complaint. I don't even have easy access to a computer to write that complaint at this point, right? But anyway, and then after I'm done this, obviously I have to finish these apples. So basically what I'm saying is my head is starting to hurt because I can feel it. I had a headache yesterday. So I'm going to take a couple more Tylenol at some point today before it gets real bad. And I'm just going to can this stuff up, people. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start now at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to start boiling my jars. I'm going to probably can the applesauce first, and then after the applesauce is canned, then I'm going to be cooking this, and then once this is cooked, then I'm going to find whatever jars I can, and I'm going to can them in this. And then those other apples will go in the fridge, and whatever apples later I'll find, I'll put in the fridge. And they'll be fine for a week or so if I don't get to them, right? This is what I mean by balancing your time with things. And as for potatoes, there's no great emergency on potatoes. But if the pears were in right now, I'd be doing pears. Because one, pears are expensive. Two, you know, they don't come fresh off a tree like they do right there for me. There is one pear tree I'm going to check maybe today, later on. I'm going to take a wee break, and I'm going to go with Andre and check this other pear tree. But the season itself was bad, right? A lot of fruit just didn't come in. Like my plum tree produced maybe 10 plums, that was it, versus 500 plums last year, right? So things go in cycles, but the weather was really, really bad. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish the applesauce. I'm going to finish up these pears, because these ones have been in the fridge for, 4 or 5 days now, 3 days, I don't know. But I'm going to cook those up, and then go take a bath, change my lovely dress that I've been wearing for a while, right? And then I'm going to see if I can find my way down to the hospital. I'm going to ask them to commit my daughter again. I say again. If they're having that much difficulty with Sierra, where she's just being obnoxious and hollering, and they're having to call security, all this shit, and they're doing this in the hall, people, so everybody can witness it. They're going to be giving her scope this, scope that, and then putting her back in the hall. after they've, like, fucking manhandled her and God knows what else they've done to her. Like, why don't they give her a fucking room? Oh, because she leaves? Is that it? She walks out? Well, if she's walking out and she's acting erratic, right, and everybody knows, like, I think it's public humiliation on Fraser Health Authority's part. They're using my daughter as a means to publicly humiliate her family, right, in terms of me and, you know, her son and, right, my kids, right. They're purposely doing this, people. Purposely doing this. As her health is deteriorating. But of course, Tisha won't understand that, right? Because she's just frustrated with the whole situation. And she's only, what, 21 now? Right? So, okay, let me get on with this. And that's another thing, people. I'm going into, what do you call that? I'm not talking to you. I'm going into hostile territory in a little while. I'm trying to empty this out without it spilling all over the place. I tried 2 different containers. It wasn't working. I tried this one and it started leaking off on the side. I tried this. And this one. So, anyway, what I want to say is, like, I'm getting panic attacks as I'm doing this, people, because I'm thinking I'm going to have to, at some point, find my way to the hospital. And for me, it's like hostile territory. Because I know what they're doing. They are publicly humiliating my family. And they like to, this is how they kind of do it sometimes. They did this with John. I picked it up with John when on February 17th, when we had that so-called little meeting, right, with that social worker and the occupational nurse or whatever the fuck, and something else, right? It's recorded. It's online. They were suggestive. They didn't come right out and say it, but they were suggesting that John had a history of going in and out of the hospital based on their information within their files. And of course, in that conversation, we had to defend ourselves, including Uncle John had to defend himself and say, no, that wasn't me going in and out of the hospital. It was Joan Duncan, J. Duncan, who was going in and out of the hospital. Not the J. Duncan, John Duncan, but the J. Joan Duncan. Right? Because she was going in and out every 2-3 weeks. It was like clockwork with her. She liked it. It gave her the attention that she lacked because she was so needy for it. So this is what they're kind of doing, and this is what they, this is kind of what they're doing with Shemay. Just like this health nurse coming to my house recently saying, oh, Shemay, tested positive with opiate, and Amari tested positive with opiate in his pee. So therefore, Shemay was a drug user based on that. But, now that you brought it to my attention, that it's misconstrued. But the point is, they've already got it going through the halls, people, through their suggestions. Because Sierra, I guess, when she gave birth, for her, she had done something, but she had been on methadone throughout her pregnancy. I have pictures of Sierra pregnant looking really, really good, people. Right? But near the very end, something happened. I don't know what happened. But I think he tested positive for something. But in light of the methadone, right, there was withdrawals for Andre, right? In terms of his temperature would go up and all this other stuff, right? So they had to regulate his temperature and whatnot. It was mostly his temperature. But because of Sierra, with the ongoing nonsense that comes from that hospital in terms of lack of proper health care as a whole, right? They have their, it's like Sierra said, you know, they're going to other people and saying, Miss Chorney, right, to either one, they are and they have committed pharmacare fraud on Sierra's files, but you wouldn't know that unless you got into the actual medical charges. It's not her medical report. The medical reports are falsified. It would be what was charged to the government in terms of, was there an operation and at what time and how much did it cost in terms of dollar amount. That's how you would find that information. But you wouldn't find it in her file because they can easily falsify files, and they do. So I'm supposed to go today at some point and go look for my sick daughter, right, who snapped within 24 hours based on what Tisha told me. As everybody's running around in the hospital, if they're not laughing and mocking at her, they're talking about how they all know who she is and what she's like. They've got security stalking her now in the hospital. I mean, how do I approach this people? They know me. They know Shimei. They know Amari. Like, how am I supposed to approach this? Right? See how they effectively isolate you from your children, one by one? Because this is a form of isolation. When I myself can't even go to the hospital and feel safe. And I've said it before, right? You can't trust them. It's pretty apparent. And they do their little skits, people. I've witnessed it. They're theatrical. It's like they are students that went to drama class versus medical school. I witnessed it with Uncle John, with that doctor, when I came around the corner, running into Uncle John's room, so that by the time I got to his room, he was standing over Uncle John, who had been drugged at that time. But we didn't know that he was being drugged, people. We were being told that the reason he was acting the way he was acting was because of the ammonia, and it was the ammonia. They failed to tell us that he was on oxycodone and they were giving him too much. And because Uncle John hadn't been on any drugs, people, for 20 fucking years, when they started giving him that oxycodone or Conten, whatever it was that they were giving him, it whacked him back. And then the doctor just stood there and played fucking games. Well, if we send him, he can go home now. You can take him. Okay, John, let's get up. John couldn't even get up. I'm like, what the hell, John? Why can't you get up? I don't know. And then the doctor piped in, well, you know, considering that, like, you know, if I send him home with you and, you know, you fall and you break your hip because you're trying to help him, how would you feel? What if John fell and broke his hip? How would you feel? What about me as a doctor? If I send you home and one of you break your hip, how am I supposed to feel? Maybe you should put him over here for a little more recovery, just for another 2 weeks or so. They were stalling for time because they were plotting behind his back to figure out how to steal his fucking money. So I know how they operate, just like they were lying about Shimei being alive. And continue to lie about it. So you know they're lying with Sierra. Is Sierra perfect? Obviously not. But Maybe if they would have provided housing for her with a support system, we wouldn't be talking about this now. But no, they're drama queens too. They want me to come down there, get loud, holler and scream, defend my daughter so that they can write in the file something that will suit their benefit later on down the fucking line. And then I have to bring Amari into that hostile environment, people. He's seeing an eye doctor that's somewhere out here, which means that if he wants to do eye surgery, he's probably going to want to book it at the Surrey Memorial Hospital. So, deja vu, MRI, deja vu, let's poke the little boy 25 times in each arm, 25 times in each arm on fucking 3 different occasions just to be able to go in there and 1, 2, and you got it. It's and they enjoy it, people. They enjoy to see you fucking have panic attacks, suffer, be frustrated, be scared. They fucking feed off of it. That's why they have Sierra in that fucking hall running around screaming, stressing everybody out. As they're screaming at her and lying and switching things around. So anyway, hold on. So you can see, right? I'm like, go away. I'm getting emotionally and verbally beat up over it, people. Right? Because everything is just, it's a train wreck. And the finger is being pointed in the wrong direction. Right? Like, I can't be mad about demon shit. For a year and a half to go by, for them to be saying what they're saying, and Julian is still lurking around in the freaking background, as he's got, like I said, his bitches in his life doing all his bidding for him so that he can hide out and fucking lurk and then call himself a dad. Well, these so-called professionals don't point no fingers at him. They let him walk fucking free, right? Because their agenda is to cover up what he did because of what they did after the fact. So they're going to continue to criminalize Shemaine. And I don't know how to fix that, people. I don't. Because if I take it to a lawyer, they're not going to help me with that. I'll be lucky to find a lawyer that will help me with the pictures of her face falling off. Right? They might, but chances are probably not, because they'll just come up with some excuse. Oh, it's not within my league. Oh, I'm busy. Oh, I can't do pro bono. Oh, you need to go to lawyer referral. Oh, forget it. You're never going to win because it's not real. You Photoshop those pictures. And it says right here, Shemaine admitted to using cocaine once a week, supposedly, before March of 2017. After March, there was none. No drug use while she was pregnant. Was there any after? I don't know. That guy was coming around. Obviously, he liked her to be in a position of being controlled. That's why people murder people, because they're trying to control them. And if they can't control them, that's what they do. They murder them. And then, when I go to the hospital, everybody becomes two-faced, including me. And it's not that I become two-faced, people, because when you do YouTube videos and you talk about stuff like this and you know that it pisses people off or whatever, right? You know, it goes back to that, you know, suffering in silence. You know, that's what abusive people like other people to do if they're being, you know, the abusive people abuse people, and the people that they're abusing, they expect them to stay silent and not talk about the abuse. Because if you do, the abuse gets better. That's documented. That shit happens all the time, right? And there are like workplace politics that kind of operate on the same fucking level, right? You're either part of the problem and join my crowd, or we're going to abuse you, right? Until you stay quiet. But the thing is, even if you stay quiet, they're still going to abuse you. So I say what I say, and I just go out in the community and fucking deal with it. Them, if they're watching, or it's in the file. It's in the file, people. The files follow you, and they like to merge them together when it's convenient for them. So it benefits them to have Sierra raging through the hospital on a regular basis with untreated medical conditions. Because when it gets to court, or if it gets to the premier's desk, or whatever it gets to, sooner or later these people are going to have to be answering to some of the things that they've done. But not if they can deflect and say, oh, but here, look at Sierra Charney. Look how she acts. She is the representation of a bad mother. Because if the mother would have been doing the mother's job, Sierra wouldn't be the way Sierra is today, because people like to blame the mother when it's convenient for them. Right? I'm not the one that brought in shitloads, truckloads of methamphetamine into the province of British Columbia, Canada, back in 2002. I'm not the person who did that. But my daughter suffered the consequences of that, people. While the healthcare system benefits through that ledger where they're, you know, using pharmacare numbers to overbill, practice defensive medicine, and commit fraud by, one, housing people like Uncle John who didn't need to be housed for 4 months, regardless of whether it was in a hospital setting in terms of a bed, like in a room, or if it was in the emergency ward, like when they took him over from here to Victoria. They took him from here and straight to the emergency ward, and then said, look how we found him. Basically, have it on video, people. And because the sister worked there and everybody fucking knew her, like everybody knows Sierra, the only difference is John's sister is reputable, right? Because she helped write the codes and the mandate and how to restrain people. That was her role in that committee that she was on. Was to figure out way to fucking restrain people under this code, that code, and that code. So that's why John got free housing for 4 months within a healthcare system that was eventually paid for by the taxpayers through some ledger that was overbilling for something that he didn't need. Which is fraud, people. Just like they were doing fraud with Shimei, as they were accusing her of being a drug addict, who basically deserved it. That was the nurse's words. She should have known better. That was the cop's words. She should have known better. They're not my words. Like I said, don't eat garlic.